Brent Faiyaz album to me is really interesting. Brent Faiyaz just dropped his newest album, Wasteland. And I think this one is, like I said, pretty interesting. He didn't release that many new songs. I believe it's 10 new songs out of 19 total tracks, which is kind of weird. I mean, there are 3 skits and 2 interludes, but it's just a little weird also with 4 singles already out. But we're just going to start it off. There are some really good tracks on this. I especially like the last skit and Angel right after it. They both just hit really emotionally for me. And then there's some other ones that I think are pretty good. The one with Trey and Monty, which I believe is called Addictions. Bad Luck is also pretty good. And Loose Change are all pretty good songs for the new ones. A lot of the singles are also good. The only one I didn't like was Wasting Time. That's just kind of a boring and generic song. But here's the track by track breakdown. Villain's Theme, the first one, it's kind of just like the reasoning behind the album. And it's just like he's done bad things, and it's just kind of like showing the bad things and how they like shape your life, like the vices in this situation. Then we have Loose Change, which I think is a pretty good one. The beat's really dramatic, which fits Brent's vocals, and then the layering of the vocals and sound effects show how Brent's kind of used the same sound but evolved and added more stuff to it. Then we have Gravity, which is already clearly a pretty good song. Definitely one of my more favorites off the entire album, and it's definitely the best single that he had released prior to the album. Then there's Heal Your Heart, which is an interesting little interlude that shows off Brent's vocals and show that this album might not be as toxic, which is kind of juxtaposed by the next one, which show that Brent is toxic and he literally does not care about his baby mama. But I believe he's playing a character named Chris in this. Then it goes to All Mine, which I think is actually pretty good. The production's solid and the classic vocals. It's a pretty solid song, but it's pretty reminiscent of like the older work off Fuck the World and Saunderson and all that type of stuff. Then Price of Fame, which I think is a really good song, which kind of shows that like the fame has kind of corrupted him and also does fit the narrative of fame corrupting him. Ghetto Gatsby, I'm not a big fan of. I thought that was probably the worst one, and it doesn't really take advantage of either of Alicia Keys or Brent's vocals, which is really weird to me. And it just, to me, it doesn't really sound that good. Wasting Time is another pretty boring song. It's a super long song that is just kind of like, it's got good production by the Neptunes and pretty good stuff by Brent, but it's also just kind of boring with him and Drake just doing their crooning. Then we have Rolling Stone, which I think the Brent vocals sound good, but just kind of a lot of the like verse is just kind of boring and it doesn't really get anywhere, which I think is kind of a common theme with a lot of this album. Then on Fuck You Talking About it's kind of weird. There's like a kind of beat switch, and then there's like the Junie verse is kind of boring, and the chorus is also generic by Brent. I just don't really like it at all. Then we get to Oblivion, which I think is kind of a turning point in the album. A lot of these last couple songs were really bad. I think the Ghetto Gatsby to Fuck You Talking About was probably the worst stretch of the entire album. Oblivion is kind of just toxicity and cheating on his baby mama, which is kind of a switch in the album to more of the sad part. Then Dead Man Walking, I think this is a really solid one. It is kind of his older stuff, but I think it's a really like upgraded version of his older stuff. Then we get Addictions, another really good song in my opinion, but the Trey and Monty verse isn't anything special, but I definitely like the beat on this one. And I think that sounds really good. The layering on Brent's vocals again is really nice on this one as well. Role Model, there are parts of this that I do like, especially the layering of Brent's vocals, but the song's kind of similar, and like I said, nothing really happens, which is like I don't know how to explain that, but it just kind of like nothing's going on in the song to me. Jackie Brown is also like it's a pretty good song. It sounds nice, but it's nothing really special. It's just like a solid song, but there are some cool pop culture references. Bad Luck is really nice. I like the production and the layering of Brent's vocals, and overall is a pretty great song to me. And then Wake Up Call, which is just a perfect skit. It really like brought me into this whole album, and I was for the whole 5-minute skit. This is a 5-minute skit, which is like I would never expect that to be a good like thing. And then it was the whole time my heart was beating. I was like, what's going to happen? And I think Brent is actually a really good storyteller, and I think he should go into like movies. Some of his old stuff, Natural Release is another one by Brent, which is like, it shows he's a really good storyteller and he knows how to like tell a story through the song or through the skit in this case, which I think is really nice. And it's like, he's a good audio like storyteller, which is, it's really nice. And I wish he could do that in some of his regular songs too, not just like on the skits. But I think this is just a great skit, and it just shows how the toxicity, like he's really woken up to the toxicity and realized how it's hurt his life. And it kind of changes. It's kind of bad that this is like the 18th song on the album. Then the next one, I think, is probably the best song on the entire album. Angel is just a really good song to wrap up the entire album and show that the toxicity is not a thing like you need to have. Like it's going to hurt your life in some ways, even if it does, help you in other ways, I guess. Like you're going to feel good in the moment, but in the end, it's going to hurt you. Like what happened to Brent, he got in a car crash. And then I just think overall that last song is like, you need to find your one queen, and hold her down. And it just, is a really good song. I really like the vocals by Brent, and I just like the beat as well. And it all kind of works well together. So I think the album is pretty good. It's kind of a mixed bag in some parts, but I mean, the last two songs are really good, and the singles are pretty solid as well. So I would say it's a pretty solid album, but there are some bad parts in my opinion. But I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10 because I think it's pretty solid in general.